The silence that defines the fate of 62 men begins not with an explosion, but with a sentence left unfinished. In the crowded acoustic theater of the Barents Sea in 1980, a Soviet diesel-electric submarine simply ceases to exist between one heartbeat and the next. This disappearance is not a mystery of the ocean, but the first move in a calculated bureaucratic game where the absence of wreckage is more valuable than the truth. To understand the disappearance of Soviet submarine B-417, one must first understand the stage upon which it vanishes. The Barents Sea is not a desolate wilderness. In the late Cold War, it is one of the most heavily monitored bodies of water on Earth. It is a choke point, a strategic corridor where the interests of the Soviet Northern Fleet grind against the surveillance networks of NATO. The water is thick with acoustic sensors. Hydrophones drift on the currents. American attack submarines prowl the thermal layers, listening for the distinctive cavitation of Soviet propellers. Soviet destroyers patrol the surface, their radar sweeping the horizon day and night. In this environment, a 2,000-ton steel vessel does not simply get lost. It is tracked. It is logged. Its acoustic signature is recorded by friend and foe alike. Every screw turn, every ballast blow, every hatch closure registers on someone's magnetic tape. A submarine might hide its location, but it cannot hide its existence. Yet, B-417 achieves the impossible. It does not sync with the catastrophic noise of imploding bulkheads, which would register on seismographs hundreds of miles away. It does not broadcast a distress signal on the international emergency frequencies. It does not deploy a rescue buoy. It simply vanishes from the operational map. One moment, it is a registered combat unit of the Red Banner Northern Fleet. The next, it is a ghost. This absence of noise creates a paradox that will haunt the investigation for decades. Naval disasters are usually loud. When the Thresher imploded, the sound was heard across the Atlantic. When the K-129 sank, the acoustic anomaly was triangulated by American listening stations. Violence at sea has a sonic footprint. The silence of B-417 implies something else entirely. It implies that whatever happened was either instantaneous, outpacing the human reaction time, or it was quiet, deliberate, and terrifyingly controlled. The state's reaction to this silence is the first clue that the story of B-417 is not a standard tragedy. In a normal accident, the priority is rescue. The narrative is one of heroism and struggle against the elements. Here, the narrative is one of immediate containment. The silence of the submarine is matched by the silence of the command structure. There are no frantic press releases. There are no public appeals for international assistance. The disappearance is treated not as a crisis to be solved, but as a gap to be closed. This section of the story frames the event not as a disaster, but as a procedural anomaly. The Barents Sea is a place of eyes and ears. For a ship to disappear here is statistically abnormal. It defies the logic of modern naval warfare. And when logic fails, suspicion begins. The audience must understand that we are not looking for a needle in a haystack. We are looking for a needle that vanished from a locked box while everyone was watching. The timeline of the erasure begins on a Tuesday morning in late August. At the naval base in Polyarny, the weather is typical for the season: low gray clouds, a biting wind coming off the Arctic ice pack, and a choppy sea that slaps against the concrete piers. B-417 is a Project 641 submarine, known in the West as the Foxtrot class. It is a workhorse of the fleet, rugged, reliable, and entirely unremarkable. The departure is defined by its routine nature. There are no secret orders sealed in lead-lined envelopes. There are no intelligence officers boarding at the last minute. The mission profile is standard: a 14-day patrol to monitor acoustic conditions and conduct training exercises in Sector 14, a patch of ocean roughly 200 miles north of the Kola Peninsula. The crew consists of 62 men. The commander is an experienced officer with a clean record. The sailors are a mix of conscripts and career warrant officers. They are well trained. They know their ship. As they cast off the lines and the diesel engines rumble to life, spitting blue smoke into the cold air, there is no sense of foreboding. The logbook on the pier records the departure time, the fuel load, and the number of provisions loaded. It is a mundane administrative entry. For the first 3 days, the mission proceeds exactly according to the flight plan. B-417 checks in with headquarters every 12 hours. These transmissions are short, coded bursts of data. Position verified, systems nominal, continuing patrol. The radio operators at the Fleet Command Center mark the submarine's progress on the large wall map with a grease pencil. It is a slow, steady line moving northeast. The last transmission occurs on the evening of the 4th day. It is not a distress call. It is a meteorological report. The radio operator on B-417 begins to read out the barometric pressure and wind speed readings, data that is useful for the fleet's weather forecasters. The voice is calm. There is no background noise of alarms or shouting. Midway through the report, the carrier wave cuts out. There is no static fade-out, which would suggest atmospheric interference. There is no garbled shouting. The transmission simply stops, as if a switch has been thrown. The operator at headquarters waits. He checks his equipment. He asks for a repeat. He waits for the scheduled backup transmission 10 minutes later. Nothing. The silence stretches into the night. Initially, the command center assumes a technical glitch. Antennas on submarines are vulnerable. Heavy seas can damage them, or salt spray can interfere with the insulators. The protocol is to wait. If a submarine loses radio contact, it is trained to surface and use its backup systems, or to release a communication buoy. 12 hours pass, then 24. The grease pencil mark on the wall map stops moving. By the second day of silence, the technical glitch theory becomes untenable. A search and rescue operation is authorized, but it is launched with a strange hesitancy. Ships are diverted from nearby sectors. Maritime patrol aircraft, heavy Tupolev Tu-95 Bears, are scrambled to sweep Sector 14. They fly low over the gray waves, their radar searching for the black silhouette of a surfaced submarine or the bright orange of life rafts. They find nothing on the surface. No flares, no radio beacons. The search moves underwater. Destroyers activate their active sonar, pinging the depths. The sound waves travel for miles through the cold water, bouncing off the seabed. They are looking for a hard return, the metallic echo of a hull resting on the bottom. On the 3rd day of the search, a patrol ship reports a discovery. An oil slick. It is thin, spreading over a few square miles of water. Nearby, lookouts spot debris floating in the swell. Small fragments of wood, perhaps from deck grating or crates. The discovery of the slick changes the tone of the operation. It shifts from rescue to recovery. The presence of oil implies a hull breach. The submarine is declared lost. The official conclusion is drafted quickly. The Naval Commission, convening in closed session, determines that B-417 suffered a technical failure of unknown nature that led to a rapid loss of buoyancy. The report suggests a catastrophic event, perhaps a battery explosion or a valve failure, that overwhelmed the crew before they could send a medal. Distress signal. The search is terminated after 10 days. The reason given is deteriorating weather. A storm is moving in from the north, whipping the Barents Sea into a frenzy that makes sonar ineffective and diving impossible. The ships turn back to Polyarny. The aircraft return to their hangars. The case is sealed. The families are informed. They receive the standard letters. Died in the line of duty. Lost at sea. There are no bodies to bury. There is no funeral. Just a memorial service in a drafty hall where admirals give speeches about sacrifice and duty. But beneath this veneer of tragic closure, the analytical layer of the official story begins to crack. To a trained observer, the conclusion is procedurally insufficient. It is a conclusion reached not by evidence, but by necessity. First, there is the matter of the wreck. The search team found oil and wood, but they never confirmed the location of the hull. They never pinged the submarine itself. They never sent a camera down to verify the identity of the vessel. In naval investigations, finding the wreck is the primary objective. Without the wreck, you cannot determine the cause. To close the case without a confirmed location is a breach of protocol. Second, the technical failure explanation is dangerously vague. Submarines are built with redundant systems. If the main ballast tanks fail, there are emergency blow systems. If the power fails, there are batteries. If the hull breaches, there are watertight doors. For a submarine to sink so fast that no signal is sent implies total, instantaneous destruction. Yet the debris field, some oil, some wood, is too small for a massive explosion. It is consistent with a leak, not a detonation. Third, the forensic closure is missing. In 1980, the Soviet Navy possesses deep water salvage capabilities. They have the Kamuna, a dedicated salvage ship. They have deep diving submersibles. The depth in Sector 14 is roughly 800 to 1,000 feet. Challenging, but well within the reach of recovery technology. Yet no attempt is made to bring up the hull or even to survey it. The state closes the case because it wants the case closed, not because it is solved. This is a red flag in military investigations. When an army or a navy stops asking questions about its own equipment, it usually means they already know the answer, and the answer is something they cannot write down. Historian Sheila Fitzpatrick has noted that in the Soviet system, the bureaucracy functioned as a mechanism for generating truth, rather than discovering it. The truth of B-417 is that it sank due to a technical accident. This narrative serves the state. It protects the reputation of the fleet. It avoids international incidents. It allows the machinery of the Navy to keep turning without the grit of an unsolved mystery jamming the gears. But the ocean is indifferent to bureaucratic truth. The oil slick disperses. The wood rots. The silence returns to Sector 14. However, the submarine itself is still there. It is sitting on the bottom of the Barents Sea, a steel tomb filled with secrets that the official report has tried to bury. The official story is a tidy sealed box. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But as we will see, the box is empty. The real story is scattered across the seabed, in fuel samples that don't match, in wood that shouldn't be there, and in the memories of men who were told to look the other way. The B-417 did not just sink, it was erased. And the erasure was so clumsy, so desperate, that it left traces more damning than the wreck itself. As the weeks turn into months, the snow begins to fall on Polyarny again. The file on B-417 gathers dust in a secure archive. The grease pencil line on the wall map is wiped away. But out in the dark water, the currents are shifting. Evidence is drifting loose. The state has declared the submarine dead, but B-417 is about to refuse that order. The silence that should not exist is about to be broken by the very evidence intended to prove it. When a lie is constructed by a committee, it often fails in the details. The grand narrative of the technical failure is robust enough to satisfy the public and the grieving families. But the physical evidence collected during the brief search operation tells a different, more fractured story. It is here, in the laboratories and the quiet conversations of junior officers, that the official version of B-417's demise begins to unravel. The first crack in the facade appears in a chemistry lab in Murmansk. The samples of the oil slick recovered from Sector 14 are sent for routine analysis. The purpose is simply to confirm that the oil came from B-417, adding a scientific stamp to the accident report. The technician runs the sample through a spectrometer, expecting to see the chemical fingerprint of solar oil. the standard diesel fuel used by Project 641 submarines. The results come back negative. The oil in the water is not marine diesel. It is a heavier, more viscous substance. It contains additives and lubricants that are not used in Soviet naval engines. It looks more like hydraulic fluid or a specific type of lubricating oil used in high-pressure industrial machinery. The technician, puzzled, runs the test again. The result is the same. He checks the reference charts. There is no match in the Soviet naval inventory for this specific chemical composition. He drafts a report noting the discrepancy. Sample does not correlate with vessel fuel supply. This report should trigger a new line of inquiry. If the oil isn't from B-417, where did it come from? Was there another ship in the area? Is the slick a decoy? But the report does not trigger an investigation. Instead, it triggers a visit from a security officer. The technician is told that there was a mix-up in the labeling of the samples. He is told to destroy the original test results and run a new sample, one provided by the officer. This new sample tests perfectly as solar diesel. The records are corrected, the anomaly is erased, but the oil is not the only physical inconsistency. The search teams also recovered wooden debris floating near the slick. B-417, like many submarines, had wooden decking gratings in certain areas of the superstructure to provide traction on the slippery steel hull. Finding wood is consistent with a breakup. However, the wood recovered is wrong. A sharp-eyed warrant officer on the recovery ship notices the edges of the fragments. The deck gratings of a Project 641 submarine are factory machined. They are cut with precision saws, treated with preservatives, and painted. The wood found in the water is rougher. The edges look like they were cut with hand tools. There are saw marks that are uneven. The wood is unpainted pine, not the treated hardwood usually used for naval decking. Furthermore, the debris is found drifting upwind of the supposed crash site. Based on the wind and current models for those days, for the debris to be where it was found, the submarine would have had to sink miles away from its last known position. Or, the debris was dumped there by a surface vessel that miscalculated the drift. These material inconsistencies, the wrong oil, the wrong wood, the wrong location, point to a disturbing possibility. The wreck site was stage managed. The slick and the debris were not the aftermath of a tragedy. They were props. Someone wanted the search team to find something quickly, to confirm the sinking and end the operation before anyone looked too closely at the empty ocean. The administrative anomalies that follow are even more telling. In the Soviet military, paperwork is sacred. Everything is documented. But in the case of B-417, the paperwork begins to behave strangely. Lieutenant Volkov, a junior intelligence officer assigned to the Northern Fleet headquarters, notices a gap in the acoustic logs. The hydrophone arrays on the seabed are constantly recording. Volkov knows that if a submarine imploded or hit the bottom, there should be a sound spike. He requests the tapes for the time frame of the disappearance. His request is denied. Not just denied, but flagged. He is summoned to the office of a senior political officer. He is asked why he is looking into closed files. He is asked if he doubts the competence of the investigatory commission. Volkov tries to explain his reasoning. "Comrade Captain, the acoustic data could help us pinpoint the hull for future salvage. If we don't have a crash transient, maybe it didn't crash. Maybe it's stranded." The political officer stares at him coldly. "The hull is lost, Lieutenant. The matter is settled. You are to focus on your current duties." 2 days later, Volkov is reassigned. He is transferred from the prestigious Northern Fleet headquarters to a remote supply depot in the Pacific Fleet, thousands of miles away. His career as an intelligence officer is effectively over. The lesson is clear to everyone else in the department. Do not ask questions about B-417. This suppression of curiosity is a hallmark of the cover-up. The state cannot afford to have its own people pulling at the loose threads. The search crews are debriefed and ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements. They are forbidden from discussing the mission with their families or even with each other in the mess hall. It was an accident, they are told. Technical failure, end of story. But sailors talk. In the barracks and smoking rooms, rumors begin to circulate. They talk about the oil that smelled wrong. They talk about the debris that looked like it came from a construction site, not a submarine. They talk about the fact that no sonar contact was ever made with the hull. "It's a phantom," one sailor whispers. "There's nothing down there." "Maybe they defected," another suggests. "Maybe they stole the boat and went to America." Don't be an idiot. If they defected, the Americans would be parading them on TV. No, it's something else, something worse. The deep analysis of these anomalies reveals that the Soviet state is engaged in a frantic damage control operation. They are not hiding the fact that the submarine is gone. They are hiding how it went. The wrong evidence suggests that the Soviet Navy needed to create a crash site to satisfy the protocols. If a submarine just vanishes without a trace, it looks suspicious. It looks like a defection or a theft. By planting debris and oil, they create a narrative of catastrophe. Look, it broke apart. It's tragic. Now let's go home. But this clumsiness reveals their panic. They didn't have time to get the right oil. They didn't have time to machine the wood properly. They grabbed whatever was available in the warehouse and dumped it overboard. It was a hasty, sloppy cover-up born of desperation. What were they so afraid of? Why go to such lengths to fake a crash site for a submarine that was presumably already dead? This brings us to the core expansion of this part. The accident itself is not the threat. The threat is what the wreck represents. If B-417 sank due to a technical flaw that affects the entire class of submarines, revealing it would compromise the fleet's readiness. But they could just fix it quietly. They wouldn't need to fake evidence. If B-417 was sunk by the Americans, revealing it would demand a military response. It could start World War III. This is a plausible motivation. If there was a collision with a U.S. sub or an accidental torpedo exchange, both sides might agree to bury the truth to prevent nuclear escalation. But there is a third possibility, one that fits the strange evidence best. Perhaps the submarine isn't where the Soviets say it is. Perhaps it didn't sink in Sector 14 at all. The fake debris field might be a diversion, drawing eyes away from the real location of the wreck. If the submarine sank somewhere it wasn't supposed to be, in territorial waters of a NATO country, or in a restricted testing zone, then admitting the location would be a geopolitical disaster. It would prove that the Soviet Navy was violating treaties or conducting illegal operations. So, they create a safe crash site in international waters. They point the finger at a spot on the map and say, "It's here." And they protect that lie with the full weight of the state security apparatus. The administrative anomalies, the reassigned officer, the destroyed samples, the silenced crews, are the immune system of the state attacking the truth. They are trying to seal the breach, but in doing so, they are confirming that there is something to hide. The tragedy of the crew is compounded by this deception. They are not just dead, they are being used as props in a lie. Their families are mourning over an empty patch of ocean, while their bodies lie somewhere else, unacknowledged and unrecovered. As 1980 draws to a close, the official file on B-417 is a masterpiece of fiction. It contains witness statements that are scripted, test results that are forged, and coordinates that point to nothing but empty mud. The system has successfully closed the loop. But the ocean is a dynamic environment. You cannot simply place a marker on the water and expect it to stay there. The real world has a way of intruding on the carefully constructed realities of bureaucrats. While the Soviet Navy is busy silencing its own people, other eyes are watching the Barents Sea. The silence of B-417 has been noted by the listening stations in Norway. The lack of a debris field has been noted by the satellite analysts in Washington. The evidence that does not fit is not just a problem for the Kremlin, it is a puzzle for the West. And unlike Lieutenant Volkov, the analysts at the CIA and MI6 cannot be reassigned to Siberia. They are free to ask the questions that the Soviet state forbids. Why, they ask, did the Soviets fake a crash site? And if the submarine isn't there, where is it? The answer to that question will trigger the next phase of the story. The lie has bought the Soviets time, but time is running out. The wreck that does not exist is about to be found, and not by the people who lost it. For 2 years, the official narrative holds. The Soviet Navy maintains the fiction that B-417 lies in pieces somewhere in Sector 14, a tragic loss caused by a technical glitch. The file is closed. The widows have their pensions. The ocean has returned to its gray, rolling anonymity. But in the summer of 1982, the carefully constructed silence is broken by an accident of hydrography. The Soviet Union, despite its secrecy, is a state obsessed with mapping. The Northern Fleet Hydrographic Service is tasked with charting the seabed of the Barents Sea to a precision that rivals the best Western efforts. They need accurate depth data for submarine navigation, for laying sensors, and for understanding the acoustic properties of the water. In July 1982, the hydrographic vessel Horizont is operating in a sector roughly 40 miles west of the official crash site of B-417. This area is not part of the search grid. It is open water, a standard transit corridor for merchant traffic. The Horizont is towing a side-scan sonar array, mapping a ridge on the ocean floor. In the control room, the paper recorder spits out a continuous scroll of data, lines representing rocks, mud, and sand. The crew is bored. Mapping is tedious work. But then the stylus jumps. A hard, distinct shape appears on the paper. It is not a rock. It is geometric. It is a long cylindrical object lying perfectly flat on the seabed at a depth of 780 feet. The captain of the Horizont orders a second pass. The sonar paints a clearer picture. The object is roughly 300 feet long. It has a vertical protrusion amidships, a conning tower. It has a tapered stern. It is undeniably a submarine. The captain checks his charts. There are no known wrecks in this area. No German U-boats, no lost trawlers. He realizes, with a jolt of adrenaline, what he has found. He radios the coordinates to fleet headquarters in Severomorsk. Unidentified submerged object located. Characteristics match Project 641. He expects praise. He expects orders to secure the site. Instead, the response is swift and chilling. Cease operations immediately. Retrieve your equipment. Depart the area at maximum speed. Do not log this contact. Do not discuss it. The Horizont is ordered back to port. The sonar records are confiscated by intelligence officers upon arrival. The crew is told they saw a geological formation. But they know what a rock looks like, and rocks don't have conning towers. The Soviet Navy has a problem. They have found their missing submarine, but it is in the wrong place. It is miles away from where they said it sank. If they acknowledge the discovery, they expose their own lie. They expose the fake debris field. They expose the fact that they stopped looking too early. So, they choose to ignore it. Again. They gamble that the ocean is big enough to hide a 300-foot steel tube forever. But the Barents Sea is a crowded theater. The Soviet Navy is not the only entity interested in the seabed. In 1983, a Norwegian research vessel, the Marjata, is conducting an environmental survey in the same general area. The Marjata is officially a civilian ship, run by the Norwegian Intelligence Service, NIS. Its mission is ostensibly to monitor radiation levels and fish stocks, but its real job is to suck up electronic signals from the Soviet fleet. The Marjata deploys a remote-operated vehicle, ROV, to take sediment samples. As the ROV glides over the murky bottom, its lights pick up something looming in the dark. A wall of black steel. The operators steer the camera closer. The steel is covered in a thin layer of silt, but the rivets are visible. The limber holes, the vents along the side of the hull, are unmistakable. The camera pans up. A conning tower rises into the gloom. The Norwegians are stunned. They know about the lost Soviet sub, of course. Everyone in the intelligence community knows. But they assumed it was lost in deep water or shattered. This vessel looks intact. It looks like it is parking. They film the wreck. They capture the hull number, partially obscured by rust but still legible. 417. This is the smoking gun. The Norwegians do not call Moscow. They call NATO headquarters in Brussels. The footage is flown to London and Washington. Analysts pore over the grainy images. They measure the length, the beam, the shape of the sail. It's a foxtrot, the experts conclude. It's B-417, and it's sitting in 800 feet of water, practically in our backyard. The discovery presents a dilemma for the West. If they announce it publicly, they humiliate the Soviets. They prove that Moscow lied about the location and the nature of the loss. But they also reveal the capabilities of their own intelligence gathering. The Marjata wasn't supposed to be looking for subs, it was supposed to be counting fish. However, the Norwegians decide that the environmental angle is the best cover. In late 1983, a carefully worded press release is issued by a Norwegian Marine Research Institute. It states that during a survey of seabed ecology, an unidentified man-made object was located. The release includes sonar images and a few frames of video. It describes the object as a likely military submarine of unknown origin. The coordinates are published. This public disclosure forces the Soviet hand. Denial is no longer possible. The world knows there is a submarine down there. The world has pictures. The reaction from the international community is immediate. Western naval experts, writing in journals like Jane's Fighting Ships, compared the dimensions released by the Norwegians with known Soviet designs. The object is 91 meters long, a British analyst writes. This matches the Project 641 class to within a few centimeters. The position of the snort mast induction valve is identical. There is no doubt. This is the missing Russian boat. The French Navy weighs in, noting that the hull appears intact, which contradicts the Soviet story of a catastrophic explosion. If the hull is whole, a French admiral comments in an interview, then the crew did not die instantly. They may have suffocated. This raises serious questions about why no rescue was attempted. The pressure mounts on Moscow. The Soviet ambassadors in Oslo and London are summoned to explain. Journalists start asking questions at press briefings. Is this your submarine? Why did you say it was somewhere else? For the Soviet leadership, this is a nightmare scenario. They have lost control of the narrative. The silence they carefully constructed has been shattered by a Norwegian robot. They are caught in a lie, and the evidence is sitting on the bottom of the sea for anyone with a camera to see. This moment marks a critical shift in the story. Until now, the Soviets relied on the obscurity of the ocean to protect their secrets. They assumed that lost at sea meant gone forever. But technology has changed the game. The deep ocean is becoming transparent. The Soviet response is a masterclass in obfuscation. They cannot deny the wreck exists, so they try to change its identity. They shift from silence to active disinformation. They release a statement through TASS, the official news agency, regarding the object discovered in the Barents Sea. Preliminary archival research suggests this may be the wreckage of a foreign submarine from the Second World War period. They claim it is a German U-boat sunk in 1944 while attacking an Allied convoy. They even provide a tentative hull number, U-486. They release grainy photocopies of wartime combat reports showing U-boat activity in that specific sector. The Barents Sea is a graveyard of many ships, the Soviet spokesman says. It is disrespectful to confuse a war grave from the fight against fascism with a modern incident. This is a clever ploy. It appeals to the shared history of World War II. It frames the Norwegians as ignorant or provocative for disturbing a war grave. It tries to shame the West into backing off. But technologically, the lie is fragile. A German Type 7 or Type 9 U-boat looks nothing like a Soviet Foxtrot. The German boats were smaller, narrower, and had a distinctive conning tower shape with anti-aircraft gun platforms. The Foxtrot is a sleek post-war design, streamlined for underwater speed. It is twice the tonnage of a U-boat. To any naval architect, the difference is as obvious as the difference between a biplane and a jet fighter. But the Soviets aren't trying to convince the architects. They are trying to confuse the public. They are trying to create enough doubt to stall any independent investigation. It might be a U-boat, the headlines read in some newspapers. Soviets dispute identity of wreck. The goal is delay. The Soviets need time to figure out what to do. The wreck is vulnerable. It is sitting in international waters, or close enough to the edge of territorial claims to be contested. Technically, if it is abandoned, anyone can claim it. This is the terrifying reality for the Kremlin. B-417 is not just a tomb. It is a treasure chest. Inside that steel hull are the latest codebooks, the latest sonar algorithms, the latest torpedo guidance systems. If the Americans or the British get inside, they will strip the Soviet Navy naked. They will learn how to track every Foxtrot in the fleet. They will learn how to jam their communications. The wreck transitions in this moment from a tragedy to a strategic liability. It is a ticking time bomb of intelligence. And now that the location is public, the race is on. The Soviet Navy dispatches a destroyer to circle the site. They declare a live-fire exercise zone around the coordinates. They are drawing a line in the water with guns. Stay away, they are saying. This is ours. But they cannot stay there forever. And they know that the Americans have submarines that don't need to surface to inspect a wreck. They have the NR-1, a nuclear-powered deep submergence vessel that can crawl along the bottom on wheels. They have the Halibut and the Sea Wolf. The invisible war for the wreck of B-417 has begun. The wreck that does not exist has become the most important piece of real estate in the Barents Sea. The lie has failed. The silence has failed. Now, the only option left is force, or a new, even more audacious deception. The discovery by the Marjata ends the era of the ghost ship. B-417 is back in the world of the living, at least politically. And for the families of the crew, this news brings a fresh wave of agony. They were told their sons were lost in deep water, unreachable. Now they see pictures of the submarine sitting intact, within diving depth. Why, the mothers ask, why didn't you save them? That question, echoing through the apartments of Murmansk, is the one the state fears most of all. Because the answer leads directly to the sealed compartment where the dead men are waiting to testify. The Soviet attempt to rebrand B-417 as a World War II relic is an act of desperate improvisation. It is a lie born of panic, constructed to buy time in a geopolitical environment where seconds are measured in intelligence leaks. But as with the fake debris field 2 years earlier, this new deception collapses under the weight of technical reality. The ocean floor is a place of hard facts, dimensions, displacement, metallurgy, and these facts do not bend to the will of the Politburo. The Soviet claim rests on the historical density of the Barents Sea. It is true that the seabed is littered with the bones of the convoy wars. German U-boats, British destroyers, and American Liberty ships rest in the freezing dark, a testament to the savagery of the conflict against fascism. By invoking this history, Moscow hopes to cloak the Barents Sea incident in the sanctity of a war grave. They release archival documents, smudged, typewritten combat reports, showing that U-486 and U-711 operated in the vicinity. The silhouette is deceptive, a Soviet admiral explains in a televised interview. Marine growth and silt distort the sonar image. We are confident this is a legacy of the Great Patriotic War. But the West is ready. The Cold War has honed the skills of naval intelligence to a razor's edge. In London, the Royal Navy's historical branch pulls the plans for the German Type 7 and Type 9 U-boats. In Washington, the Office of Naval Intelligence runs computer models comparing the Marjata footage with the blueprints of a Soviet Project 641. The results are damning. A German Type 7 U-boat is roughly 220 feet long. A Project 641 is nearly 300 feet long. That is an 80-foot difference, too large to be explained by sonar distortion. The conning tower of a German U-boat is located almost exactly amidships. The sail of a Foxtrot is positioned further forward, closer to the bow, to accommodate the diesel engine intakes. The hull shape is fundamentally different. U-boats have a saddle tank construction, giving them a bulging, organic look. The Foxtrot is a streamlined cylinder designed for higher underwater speeds. Western naval journals publish side-by-side comparisons. Jane's Defense Weekly runs a feature titled, "The U-Boat That Wasn't." They overlay the wireframe of a Foxtrot onto the sonar images released by Norway. It is a 97 match. The remaining 3 is accounted for by the angle of the camera and the seabed topography. Unless the Kriegsmarine developed a secret class of submarine in 1944 that looks exactly like a 1960s Soviet diesel-electric, a British expert writes dryly, this is B-417. The lie fails because it underestimates the technical literacy of the audience. In the 1940s, a government could lie about a ship's identity, and few would know. In the 1980s, acoustic analysis and satellite imagery make such deceptions impossible. The ocean has become transparent to data. The embarrassment for Moscow is acute. They have been caught in a clumsy fabrication. The international press begins to ask why a superpower would need to lie about a standard accident. Is there something nuclear on board? Is it a spy ship? The denial fuels the very speculation it was meant to quash. But while the public debate focuses on the identity of the wreck, the private debate inside the Kremlin focuses on a much darker reality: why they cannot go down and get it. The Soviet Union has the ships. The Kommuna, a veteran salvage catamaran, has raised submarines before. They have deep-sea tugs. They have divers. The depth is manageable. So why leave it there? The answer lies in the brutal calculus of Cold War security. To recover B-417 would be to expose it. A salvage operation is a massive, noisy, visible undertaking. It requires a flotilla of ships to anchor over the site for weeks or months. It requires bright lights, cranes, and constant radio traffic. In the satellite age, you cannot hide a salvage job. If the Soviets park a fleet over the wreck, they confirm its location to the inch. They invite Western spy ships to circle the perimeter, recording every sound, photographing every piece of debris brought to the surface. More importantly, raising the hull would reveal the cause of the sinking. If B-417 sank because of a design flaw, a bad weld, a faulty valve, that flaw is likely present in every other Foxtrot-class submarine in the fleet. The Soviet Navy operates dozens of these boats. They are the backbone of the non-nuclear fleet. Admitting a systemic weakness would cripple their deterrence. NATO analysts would know exactly where to hit a Foxtrot to kill it. There is also the intelligence value of the wreck itself. A submarine is a library of secrets. Inside the hull are the sonar systems. If NATO gets a look at the transducers, they can calculate the exact frequency range and sensitivity of Soviet ears. They can learn how to build quieter submarines that the Foxtrot cannot hear. Inside the radio room are the encryption machines. The codebooks might be waterlogged, but the rotors and the logic circuits of the cipher devices are made of metal. If recovered, they could allow the NSA to break the Soviet naval codes, reading not just past messages, but future ones. Inside the torpedo room are the weapons. The guidance systems of the torpedoes are top secret. Knowing their search patterns and acoustic triggers would allow NATO ships to develop perfect countermeasures. B-417 is a technological time capsule. As long as it sits on the bottom, sealed and dark, it is safe. The secrets are locked inside. But the moment you crack it open, the secrets spill out. And there is a final, grim reason for the delay. The fatal delay. The longer the submarine sits there, the more sanitized it becomes by nature. The codebooks turn to mush. The magnetic tapes degrade. The batteries corrode. Time destroys intelligence. The Soviet leadership makes a cold calculation. It is better to leave the submarine on the bottom and let the ocean destroy the secrets than to risk bringing them up. They decide that the intelligence liability of the wreck outweighs the moral obligation to the crew or the prestige of a recovery. So, the policy shifts from deny to protect. The wreck transitions from a lost asset to a piece of territory that must be defended. The destroyer patrols continue. The live fire zone remains in effect. The message to NATO is clear. We know it's there. You know it's there. But if you touch it, we shoot. This standoff creates a bizarre status quo. The submarine sits in the dark, unvisited by its owners, but heavily guarded. It is a king's tomb that the king is afraid to open. But this strategy ignores one critical variable: the ambition of the United States Navy. While the Soviets are playing defense with destroyers and press releases, the Americans are playing offense with technology that the Kremlin can scarcely imagine. The U.S. has developed a capability for covert, deep-sea operations that renders surface patrols irrelevant. The USS Halibut, a retired cruise missile submarine converted into a special operations platform, has already tapped Soviet underwater cables in the Sea of Okhotsk, Operation Ivy Bells. It can hover, it can deploy divers, it can operate in total silence. And then there is the NR-1, a small, nuclear-powered, deep submergence vessel. It has wheels. It can drive along the ocean floor like a tank. It can stay down for weeks. It doesn't need to surface. A destroyer on the surface cannot see a submarine crawling in the mud 1,000 feet below. The Soviet decision to leave B-417 on the bottom turns it into a sitting duck for Western intelligence. By refusing to recover it, they essentially gift wrap it for the opposition. The intelligence value is too high to ignore. For NATO, B-417 is a pristine example of the enemy's main battle line. They want to know how strong the steel is. They want to know how loud the pumps are. They want to know what the propeller looks like. The stage is set for a silent robbery. The Soviets are guarding the front door with guns and lies. The Americans are planning to come in through the basement window. This section highlights the tragedy of the situation. The paralysis of the Soviet state, born of paranoia and pride, makes the ultimate violation of the wreck inevitable. They are so afraid of looking weak that they make themselves vulnerable. Meanwhile, inside the hull, the human cost of these decisions is frozen in time. The crew is still there. They are not strategic assets, they are men. And as the political game plays out above them, the evidence of their final moments remains locked in the dark, waiting for someone, anyone, to come and read it. The lie that failed has exposed the wreck. The refusal to recover it has abandoned the wreck. Now, B-417 belongs to whoever is brave enough to go down and take it. And in the Cold War, bravery is often measured by how much you can steal without getting caught. The Barents Sea, so often a barrier, becomes a highway for the silent war. The currents swirl around the conning tower of B-417, washing away the silt, exposing the steel to the eyes of the new visitors who are coming not to mourn, but to dissect. The geopolitical chess game played on the surface treats the submarine as an object, a piece of technology, a political liability, a coordinate on a map. But inside the pressure hull of B-417, the story is not about state secrets or propaganda. It is about 62 men facing the end of their world in a steel tube at the bottom of the sea. It is only years later, through fragmented reports and unauthorized leaks from salvage divers, that the human dimension of the tragedy finally breaks the surface. When the first unauthorized eyes look inside B-417, whether they are Soviet divers conducting a secret survey or Western operatives stealing technology, they find a scene that contradicts the official narrative of a sudden catastrophic failure. The submarine did not implode. It did not fill with water in seconds, drowning the crew before they could react. The divers find the watertight doors sealed. They find the emergency lighting systems activated, their batteries long dead. They find the controls set for a desperate maneuver. The discovery of the bodies is the most harrowing aspect of the investigation. In the forward torpedo room, compartment 1, the divers find a cluster of men. They are not at their stations. They are gathered near the escape trunk. They are wearing their ISAM suits, the individual submarine rescue apparatus. These are heavy, rubberized suits designed to allow a sailor to exit a sunken submarine, ascend to the surface, and survive the cold water. This simple fact changes everything. If the crew had time to don their rescue suits, the disaster was not instantaneous. They survived the initial impact with the seabed. They had time to assess the situation. They had time to organize. They had time to hope. The recovery of the ship's logbook, found in the officer's mess wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the damp, provides the timeline of the final hours. The entries, written in the steady hand of the navigator, describe a sequence of events that is terrifying in its banality. 0814, loss of depth control. Stern planes jammed in dive position. 0816, impact with seabed. Depth 240 meters. Hull integrity holding. Minor leaks in compartment 7. 0830, main power lost. Switching to emergency batteries. 0900, fire in compartment 5. Diesel engine room. Compartment sealed. 10:15. Atmosphere deteriorating. CO2 levels rising. Preparations for evacuation. The logbook reveals that the crew fought for their ship. They tried to blow the ballast tanks, but the pressure was too great, or the valves were damaged. They tried to restart the engines. They tried to put out the fire. When it became clear that the submarine would not rise, they made the decision to abandon ship. The escape plan for a Project 641 submarine at this depth is theoretically viable, but incredibly dangerous. The crew would gather in the forward or aft torpedo rooms, which double as escape locks. They would flood the compartment to equalize the pressure with the ocean outside. Then, they would open the hatch and ascend, one by one, using the buoyancy of their suits. The logbook's final entry is a roll call. It lists the names of 28 men who are preparing to exit via the forward trunk. The others, the wounded, the men trapped in the aft compartments by the fire, are presumably left behind or dead. "We are leaving now," the captain writes. "The air is foul. Good luck to us. Long live the motherland." This is the critical revelation. 28 men attempted to leave B-417. So where are they? If 28 men escaped a submarine in 1980 in a heavily trafficked sea, why was not a single body found? Why was not a single distress flare seen? The ISAM suits are bright orange. They are designed to be visible for miles. A group of 28 survivors on the surface would be a significant target. The depth of 240 meters, roughly 780 feet, is on the jagged edge of survivability for a free ascent. The risk of nitrogen narcosis and the bends is extreme. But it is not impossible. Soviet submariners trained for this. There are 3 possibilities, each darker than the last. Possibility 1, equipment failure at scale. Perhaps the suits failed. The 1980s Soviet economy was plagued by quality control issues. If the rubber was brittle, if the breathing apparatus valves were stuck, the men might have drowned in the escape trunk or died of embolism during the ascent. Their bodies would drift away with the currents, sinking eventually as the suits lost buoyancy. Possibility 2. Hypothermia and dispersal. They made it to the surface. They popped up in the freezing Barents Sea, gasping for air, their blood fizzing with nitrogen. But the surface was empty. The search operation hadn't started yet. Remember the delay in reporting the silence? They floated there, 28 orange dots in the gray waves, waiting for rescue that wasn't coming. The water temperature was 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Survival time without a raft is measured in minutes, perhaps an hour with the suit. They died of cold, and the currents carried them north into the ice pack, where they were never seen again. Possibility 3. External interference. This is the theory that is whispered, but never written down. Did someone see them? Was there a ship nearby? If a NATO vessel was tracking B-417 when it went down, they would have seen the escape. But to rescue Soviet sailors would be an international incident. Would they leave them? Or, more disturbingly, did a Soviet ship see them? If the submarine was on a mission it shouldn't have been on, or if the technical failure was something shameful, did the state decide that dead men tell no tales? It is a horrific thought that a rescue ship might turn away, or worse. But in the paranoid logic of the Cold War, the suppression of the witness is a standard tactic. The investigation stops here, deliberately. The official files do not mention the escape attempt. To admit that men survived the sinking only to die on the surface is to admit a failure of rescue. It transforms the accident from a mechanical tragedy into a logistical murder. The state failed to find them in time. The divers who found the bodies in the torpedo room, the ones who didn't make it out, report that the men looked peaceful. They had likely succumbed to carbon dioxide poisoning or hypothermia before the water rose too high. But the empty suits found in the locker, the missing suits, scream of a different fate. The dead who spoke too late are the men whose names were on that list. They spoke through the logbook. They said, "We are alive. We are trying." And the silence of the ocean swallowed them. The discovery of the escape attempt reframes the entire narrative of B-417. It wasn't just a metal coffin that dropped to the bottom. It was a crime scene where the victims tried to call for help. The logbook is classified. It is not given to the families. The mothers are told their sons died instantly, without pain. The lie is meant to be a kindness, but it is also a shield for the admirals who waited 24 hours to launch the search planes. The unanswered question of the missing survivors hangs over the wreck like a shroud. It suggests that the Barents Sea is not just a graveyard, but a place where people can be erased. For the Western intelligence teams who later visit the wreck, the presence of the bodies inside creates a grim working environment. When the NR-1 or other covert submersibles arrive to steal the codebooks, they're robbing a tomb. The American divers, or ROV operators, have to maneuver past the floating remains of their enemies. There is a strange, dark chivalry in this. The intelligence reports often note the location of the crew with respect. Remains located in compartment 1, undisturbed. They are there for the machines, not the men. But the knowledge that the crew tried to escape adds a layer of moral complexity to the NATO operation. These men were not just faceless communists. They were sailors who fought to live. And now, their struggle is just a footnote in an intelligence dossier stamped top secret. The failure to recover the bodies, or even to acknowledge the escape attempt, is the final insult of the Soviet state to its servants. The crew of B-417 did their duty to the end. They followed protocol. They tried to save the ship, and in return they were left to rot in the dark, their final message locked in a safe that the government refused to open. As the years pass, the bodies inside the hull will dissolve. the sea will claim them completely. But the missing 28, the ones who might have made it to the surface, remain a ghost story. Did they see the sky one last time? Did they see a ship on the horizon that turned away? We will never know. The ocean keeps its secrets, and the state keeps its archives. The dead spoke, but they spoke too late for anyone to listen. By the mid-1980s, the wreck of B-417 has settled into a strange dual existence. To the public and the grieving families, it is a sacred, unreachable war grave, protected by the silence of the deep. But to the intelligence agencies of the West, it is an open-air laboratory. The Soviet refusal to salvage the vessel has created a vacuum of ownership, and in the Cold War, a vacuum is simply an invitation. The return to the grave is not announced with press releases. It happens in the blind spots of Soviet surveillance, under the cover of the long Arctic night, or disguised as oceanographic research. The operation is driven by a simple, ruthless logic. If the Soviets won't recover their own technology, the West will do it for them. The first signs that the grave is being disturbed appear years later, when Russian submersibles finally returned to the site in the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The inspectors expect to find a wreck degraded by time and corrosion. Instead, they find a wreck that has been surgically altered. The hull of a Project 641 submarine is built of high tensile steel, designed to withstand immense pressure and torpedo impacts. Yet, the inspectors find clean, geometric cuts in the outer casing. These are not the jagged tears of an explosion or the random damage of a collision. They are precise rectangles, cut with thermal lances or high-pressure abrasive water jets, tools that require sophisticated delivery systems and immense stability. These openings are located strategically. There is a cut near the bow, directly over the sonar transducer array. There is another cut near the sail, accessing the radio room and the encryption center. Even more disturbing is the debris found on the seabed around the wreck. Among the rusting Soviet steel, the Russian lights pick up objects that do not belong. A discarded ballast weight from a submersible that matches no Soviet design. A fragment of a cutting disc made of a composite material manufactured only in the United States. A piece of a breathing apparatus hose with English markings. These are the fingerprints of a burglary. The intelligence assessment, conducted quietly by the new Russian Federation Navy, reconstructs a timeline of violation. It concludes that B-417 was visited repeatedly between 1982 and 1989. The likely perpetrator is a state actor with advanced deep submergence capabilities. This is a diplomatic euphemism for the United States Navy, or possibly the British Royal Navy. The primary suspect is the legendary NR-1, the U.S. Navy's nuclear-powered research submarine. NR-1 was a technological marvel, a small, long-endurance vessel that could dive deeper and stay down longer than anything else in the world. It had wheels to drive on the ocean floor. It had a manipulator arm. It was the perfect tool for picking the lock of a dead submarine. Other suspects include the USS Halibut or the USS Parchi, submarines modified for special projects, equipped with saturation divers who could work outside the boat at great depths. The objectives of these missions were specific and highly technical. Objective 1. The ears of the bear. The sonar system of a submarine is its most closely guarded secret. It dictates what the sub can hear and how far away it can hear it. By cutting into the bow of B-417 and removing the sonar transducers, the microphones, NATO analysts could reverse engineer the Soviet capability. They could test the crystals in a lab. They could determine exactly which frequencies the Foxtrot class was blind to. This knowledge would allow NATO submarines to operate in the deaf spots of the Soviet fleet. It would allow them to tailor their own noise signatures to be invisible to Soviet sensors. It was a tactical advantage worth billions of dollars. Objective 2. The codes. While the codebooks themselves might have dissolved, the encryption machines, the hardware, would still be intact. Recovering a rotor or a circuit board from a Soviet cipher machine would allow the NSA to understand the logic of the encryption. Even if the daily keys changed, the method of encryption often remained stable for years. Breaking the naval codes would allow NATO to track the entire Northern Fleet in real time. It would turn the ocean from a dark forest into a lit room. Objective 3. Metallurgy and construction. The West also wanted to know what the sub was made of. By taking core samples of the whole steel, they could test its yield strength. They could calculate exactly how deep a Foxtrot could dive before it crushed. This would tell NATO captains exactly where the safe depth was, the depth where a Soviet sub couldn't follow. They also examined the propellers, looking for design flaws that created noise. They examined the anechoic tiles, the rubber coating, to see how well it absorbed sonar pings. The deep analysis of this operation reveals a chilling reality. The ocean floor had become a battlefield without flags. The concepts of sovereignty and war graves meant nothing at 800 feet. It was a lawless frontier where the only rule was, don't get caught. This wasn't just theft, it was strategic reconnaissance. The West was dissecting the enemy's body while it was still warm. They were learning the anatomy of the Soviet war machine so they could kill it more efficiently if the Cold War ever turned hot. The irony is palpable. The Soviets refused to recover B-417 because they feared exposing its secrets. By leaving it there, they ensured that the secrets were exposed in the most damaging way possible. If they had raised the sub, they would have controlled the access. By leaving it, they gave NATO unlimited, unsupervised time to study it. The Russian report on the seabed traces notes tracks in the mud, parallel ruts left by wheels. The NR-1 had literally driven up to the wreck, parked, and gone to work. It is an image of humiliation for the Russian Navy. An American submarine driving circles around their lost ship, treating it like a salvage yard. But there is another layer to this intrusion. The Western divers, or ROVs, had to enter the hull. They had to navigate the cramped, flooded corridors of a tomb. Imagine the scene inside. The NATO diver, breathing helium oxygen, floating through the dark water of the radio room. His light beam cuts through the gloom, illuminating the floating debris. A clipboard, a shoe, a photograph of a sailor's wife. He pushes past the body of a Soviet radio man, drifting in the current, to get to the safe. He uses a hydraulic spreader to pop the door. He grabs the machine. He leaves. It is a profound violation. It is grave robbing sanctioned by the state. Yet, in the cold logic of the Cold War, it was necessary. If the roles were reversed, if an American Los Angeles-class sub had gone down in the Barents Sea, the Soviets would have been there with their own grappling hooks before the bubbles had stopped rising. In fact, they tried to do exactly that with the K-129, which the Americans stole with the Glomar Explorer and other lost Western assets. The discovery of the Western interference in the 1990s causes a brief diplomatic flare-up, but it quickly dies down. The new Russian government has bigger problems than an old wreck. The economy is collapsing. The fleet is rusting at the pier. They cannot afford to start a fight over a submarine they claimed was a German U-boat anyway. So, the evidence of the intrusion is filed away. The cuts in the hull remain. The American tools on the seabed are left where they lie, strange artifacts of a secret war. But the legacy of the operation remains. The intelligence gathered from B-417 likely informed Western naval tactics for a decade. It helped the U.S. Navy maintain its underwater dominance. The dead crew of B-417, who died trying to save their ship, ended up serving the enemy. Their vessel became a teacher for the very forces they were sworn to defeat. This chapter emphasizes the total lack of sanctuary in modern warfare. There is no place deep enough to hide. There is no death final enough to stop the exploitation. The wreck of B-417 stands as a monument not just to Soviet tragedy, but to Western opportunism. It also serves as a stark reminder of the price of the Soviet cover-up. The lie about the U-boat didn't fool the experts, it just gave them permission. By disowning the wreck, Moscow legally abandoned it. They waived their rights to it. NATO simply accepted the gift. As the cameras of the Russian inspection team pull back, leaving the scarred hull in the darkness, the viewer is left with a sense of the wreck's exhaustion. It has been crushed by the sea, abandoned by its masters, and gutted by its enemies. It is a hollow shell, stripped of its secrets and its dignity. The NATO return to the grave was the final act in the operational life of B-417. It was the moment the submarine truly died. Not when it hit the bottom, but when it was hollowed out by the people it was built to kill. The intelligence war moved on to new targets, leaving the empty husk behind, a silent witness to the ruthlessness of nations. When the Russian Federation finally confirms the true identity and condition of B-417 in the 1990s, the revelation does not trigger a diplomatic crisis. There are no angry speeches at the United Nations. There are no demands for reparations from NATO for the violation of the wreck. Instead, there is a quiet, weary acceptance. The silence that began in 1980 has, by the end of the century, calcified into a permanent state of affairs. The reason the USSR, and later Russia, could not respond openly to the looting of their submarine lies in the intricate trap of their own making. To accuse the United States of stealing secrets from B-417 would require admitting that B-417 was there in the first place. It would require admitting that the German U-boat story was a lie. It would require admitting that the Soviet Navy had abandoned its own men and its own technology. Furthermore, there is no legal framework for enforcing sovereignty over a wreck that has been officially disowned. By claiming for a decade that the submarine was not B-417, the Soviet government effectively stripped it of its diplomatic protection. In international maritime law, an abandoned vessel in international waters is fair game. The Americans could argue, with cynical precision, that they were merely salvaging unclaimed marine debris. There is also the risk of escalation. In the tense final years of the Cold War and the chaotic early years of the Russian Federation, picking a fight over a 10-year-old wreck was strategically unwise. The intelligence damage was already done. The codes were broken. The sonar was analyzed. Complaining about it wouldn't put the secrets back in the box. It would only highlight the incompetence of the state that lost them. So, the state chooses reputation management over confrontation. The controlled disclosure begins. The Russian Navy releases a revised history of the incident. They admit, finally, that B-417 was lost due to an accident. They admit the location, but they frame the entire episode as an environmental issue. We are monitoring the reactor compartment, they say. Even though B-417 was diesel-electric, the public often confuses it with nuclear subs, and the Navy does little to correct them initially, or focuses on the battery acid and fuel. Or they focus on the heroism of the crew, erecting a small monument in Polyarny. The looting of the hull is glossed over. The cuts in the steel are described in vague terms as damage from the impact or structural failure, despite their obvious geometric precision. The state sanitizes the history to protect its dignity. This is the price of silence. By refusing to tell the truth when it mattered, the Soviet Union lost control of the narrative forever. They lost the ability to defend their dead. They allowed their enemy to write the final chapter of the submarine's history with a cutting torch. The families of the crew are the ones who pay the highest price. They receive no new answers. They are told that the wreck is too dangerous to raise, that it is a grave that must be respected. They do not know about the NR-1 driving over their sons' coffins. They do not know about the divers swimming past the bodies. They are left with the sanitized myth of the technical failure, a story that explains everything and nothing. The price of silence is also paid in lost lessons. Because the failure of the submarine was covered up, the design flaws that might have caused it were never openly addressed in the engineering schools. The operational mistakes were not taught in the naval academies. The culture of secrecy ensured that the same errors could be repeated. As the camera pulls back from the rusting hull of B-417, leaving it to the darkness and the slow work of the corrosion, we are left to ask, what is this story really about? It is easy to get lost in the spy craft, the secret missions, the underwater robots, the code books. These are the elements of a thriller. But B-417 was not a special submarine. It was not carrying a doomsday weapon. It was not on a mission to defect. It was a standard, mass-produced tool of war, crewed by ordinary men doing a job. Its significance lies not in what it was, but in what it became. B-417 became a mirror for the Cold War itself. It reflected the paranoia, the cynicism, and the absolute ruthlessness of the conflict. It showed us a Soviet system so paralyzed by the fear of looking weak that it would lie about the location of a disaster, even if it meant abandoning survivors. It showed a system that treated information as more valuable than human life. The decision to fake a crash site and claim the wreck was German is a perfect encapsulation of the Soviet relationship with truth. Truth is just another asset to be manufactured or destroyed as needed. But it also showed us a Western system that was equally ruthless, though in a different way. The NATO operation to loot the wreck showed a pragmatic, almost predatory opportunism. The West saw a tragedy and saw an opportunity. They didn't mourn the dead. They strip-mined them for data. It showed that beneath the rhetoric of freedom and democracy, the West was playing the same cold game of advantage. The ocean floor became the true battlefield. We think of the Cold War as a standoff, missiles in silos, armies staring at each other across the Berlin Wall. But B-417 reminds us that the war didn't end at the surface. It continued in the dark, in places where no one could testify. It was a war of trespass, of theft, of silence. The crew of B-417 are the collateral damage of this silent war. They died once in 1980, suffocating in the dark or freezing in the water. But then they died a second death, a death of memory. Their identities were erased, their struggle was denied, and their tomb was violated. The submarine continued to serve long after its engine stopped. It served the Soviet state as a prop in a disinformation campaign. It served the American state as an intelligence goldmine. It served everyone except the men who sailed it. Today, B-417 is still down there. The cuts in the hull are rusting over. The silt is covering the tracks of the NR-1. The ocean is reclaiming the evidence. But the story refuses to stay buried. It resurfaces in the archives, in the memories of old spies, and in the questions of a new generation. It reminds us that in the game of nations, there are no clean hands. There are only secrets that haven't been found yet. The tragedy of B-417 is not that it sank. Ships sink. The tragedy is that it was never allowed to rest. It was used, exploited, and lied about until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. And in that hollow shell, we see the true face of the Cold War. A conflict where the dead have no rights, and the truth has no value unless it can be weaponized. The crew of B-417 remains on patrol, guarding a secret that everyone already knows, in a grave that has been robbed, in a war that is supposed to be over.